Howdy. Let's continue our discussion. What is the first phase of risk assessment? This is going to surprise and possibly disappoint many of you who like to get right on the keyboard. Let's figure out what our vulnerabilities are. Let's check those firewalls. Let's do stuff on the network. What you're going to find in this class is most risk assessment is not a hands-on testing. There's one control that you do your vulnerability screening. But your first phase of risk assessment is usually setting up the project and beginning to look at the people and processes. So it is important to get management buy-in. You're going to be taking people's time. Now, here's the story. I took a consulting project a few years ago, and I wish I hadn't because they negotiated my rate down and they didn't want to spend as much money as what it was going to take to do it well. And I could not believe when the guy said, well, don't you just have something off the shelf? And I explained that no, a risk assessment has to be specific to his enterprise, which I could not get into because it was a top secret SCIF. And so he just kind of fed me data in a template. And all he was trying to do was cross some T's and dot some I's from the government, have a risk assessment. It was not going to be a document he used. So I did the project, and then he kind of complained because I'd messed up his template and whatever. The management buy-in, the management communication was my fault. I was a consultant, and I should have said, look, you cannot do it for this. You're giving me about half the time I really need. And second of all, our relationship was not such that when the template didn't work, I contacted the company I was doing the assessment through, feeling like it was their job to contact the ultimate customer, and I erred on that because they didn't contact him. So every time you do a consulting project, you learn something. You know, I've done this for many, many years, and I'm still constantly surprised. But you not only need to get the management buy-in, but communication. You need to identify a customer at the ultimate site and say, hey, if I have a question, this is who I'm going to go to. Because what it says is true. Success depends on the cooperation of people. If you're not going to get cooperation, you're not going to get a quality risk assessment. Another thing that you need to practice, and it's easy to say, hard to do, non-attribution. When you find something wrong in an organization, you have to be very cautious that people don't feel like they are on the defensive, that they are to blame. So you need to figure out a way that problems are exposed and you can deal with those problems to make the site more secure without making people defensive, because defensive people will not feel free to openly share information with you. The last thing I put here is your findings are proprietary to that customer or client. It is not out for you to discuss. It is not for you to discuss with coworkers who went on that project, people outside the company, not to publish comments, or as I said, I've done some risk assessments. I've tried to scrub them down to where I'm happy that I've anonymized the customer so I can use them for classroom. But this is your first phase. And in a minute, perhaps the slide will change. Or not. Okay, so why are risk assessments done? Well, the bad answer is for compliance, because we have to do them, because the federal government has that stupid law, we have to do them and continuously monitor them. So here it is. It's printed off, it's on a shelf, and in 6 months I'll get it down and update it. Wrong answer. Risk assessments are part of good security engineering and management practice. And we need to have risk assessments because we cannot have 100% security. So since we cannot have 100% security, there is always inherent and residual risk. Residual risk means just that. We do everything we can, and there's still that residual risk out there that we cannot control. We also do it for an independent review to validate internal reviews. Interestingly enough, we have a program called FedRAMP, which is for certification and accreditation of cloud-based services sold to the government. If you go to AWS, the Amazon services, and you go down their certification, you will see they are FedRAMP compliant. So if anyone uses their services and sells to the government, they're covered under FedRAMP. FedRAMP requires a 3PAO, third-party authorizing official. But if you're not cloud, the government doesn't require it, which to me is wrong. I believe organizations and enterprises should have to have some third party validate their risk assessments and whether they are compliant. So we do risk assessments also to compare with similar organizations. And we learn from that, and there are some things called ISACs and ISARAs that we'll talk about later, where we can develop organizations that share a lot of our cybersecurity vulnerability and lessons learned without running afoul of antitrust law and the like. So we want to compare, but at the same time, that's for the organization to do. And remember, if you as a consultant, and by consultant, I mean you might go work for Deloitte, and Deloitte might put you on a site. This is proprietary. Remember, confidentiality is your reputation. So the goals of the risk assessment are what's here. What information is critical? Identify the systems that process, store, transmit that critical information. And I would say womb to tomb, create, process, store, transmit, or destroy. Womb, from creation to tomb, destruction. Process, store, transmit should really say create, process, store, transmit, or destroy. Determine the proper security posture, identify potential vulnerabilities, recommend solutions, and all along the way, you want to document. I go back to my former student's comment about how it was tedious and detailed and boring, and I made him stand up, and I made him do presentations, and I made him work in teams. I made him do all this stuff, but the document is so you can pick it up in 6 months later and know what you did. Know what your assumptions are. Defend your conclusions. So you prepare. You refine the customer's need. You're going to gain an understanding. You're going to coordinate logistics. You're going to write an assessment plan. You're going to do all those boring things that technical people don't like to do, right? You're going to be under a contract, or you're going to be under some kind of agreed upon statement of work, or something that you know going in what is expected coming out. You don't want it open-ended, because your clients' or customers' expectations will continue to grow, as will the scope of your project. So when we do the pre-assessment activities, we typically, and I put a typical timeline up here, we'll take a few weeks to assign and coordinate. I was called in as an emergency a couple of years ago, a company in San Mateo. I got a call on Monday. By Tuesday, I got a call from a consultant. Could I recommend you? By Tuesday, they called me. By Wednesday, they interviewed me. They had me under contract. By Monday, I was there. Forget this pre-assessment. Their hair was on fire, okay? So they were behind. They had gotten knocked down by the government for not having their systems compliant. Ironically, this particular client had passed the technical evaluations but failed the documentation. So forget the 2 to 4 weeks. I coordinated on the plane going out there as best I could, did an on-site visit, and this is pretty much, it took us about 8 weeks total to get the report done. So we're going to use this. We're going to pre-assess. We're going to learn as much as we can. We're going to acquire knowledge about our customer, the configuration. We're going to ask for documentation. We're going to get as much as we can. So when we come in that door, we're as smart as we can be. We're going to have a lot of things planned. We're going to have questions planned. We're going to have, if we've got multiple team members, we're going to have what each team member's role is going to be. And sometimes this requires getting team members with various expertise. I worked in industrial control systems, highly automated systems in oil and gas. You're not going to take somebody that's got 20 years experience doing retail and banking and drop them in that environment. You're going to need team members with that expertise or experience. You're going to want to have independent documentation review. You're going to want to have communication with others, so when you're doing your analysis and you come up with ideas, somebody can say, yes, you're on the right path, no, you're not on the right path, or, oh my gosh, you've discovered something we never thought about, we need to delve into that. And you're going to want to coordinate your site visit. So whoever you're going to see, you're going to have a schedule, you're going to have an agenda, you're going to know it's on their calendars, you're going to call before, you're going to confirm. Good project management. And this is why we want to gain an understanding. I said you want to acquire knowledge. You want to agree what the assessment team's going to do between them and the customer, and you want to prepare for being there. Typically, you have a team of a couple of people. I like working in teams of 2 or 3. You have a customer representative. You're going to see that in FedRAMP later, that you have these specifically named, the system owner, meaning the person who is ultimately responsible for that data. May not be a technical person, but maybe that person that that basically owns that data can give permission to change it, to do different things. So I've got the customer representatives here. I haven't introduced that nomenclature yet, but you're going to have specific names: information system security officer, system owner, and the like. And these are all come from FedRAMP. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And I probably should do a lecture now on FedRAMP, but then that kind of circumvents some of the things I want you to discover on your own. FedRAMP is very well coordinated by the federal government. You're going to find a lot of information out there. You're going to find a lot of templates. You're going to find a lot of structure. And quite frankly, my recommendation is to approach any risk assessment using that FedRAMP knowledge, even if it's not in the cloud. There's so much out for FedRAMP now. It's just a different way the government has approached it. Again, talking to my student last night, he said that his particular group at Deloitte had come up with a specific way to do it because they had to be compliant with NIST and ISO and all this. So they had their own template package and how they did things. However, he agreed with me that there's a lot out there for you to use. And basically, we're going to be doing what's called a gap analysis. Hey, this is where you guys are. You're at a high risk right now. You got a lot of problems, or you're at a medium risk, but you want to go to a low risk. So we're going to take your current security posture. We're going to give you some objectives, and we're going to eliminate that gap. Okay, it's a gap analysis, and that's a term of art. I'm going to look at what as is. I'm going to develop a roadmap and a plan, and this is the 2B, and I'm going to minimize the gap. The second part is to conduct the risk assessment. And you're going to perform data gathering, validations. You're going to use interviews. You're going to use documentation that's already there. You're going to ask for system demonstrations. Now, let me tell you, project management. Even before I did cybersecurity risk, I did knowledge acquisition and the like to build expert systems. And before I did that, I did systems analysis to build software for typically maintenance and logistics or inventory control of high dollar assets or the like. You interview, you take notes, you take what time it is, what room you met in, who was with you. You document this, you create an electronic document. Every interview. What I do then is my file title is the date and interview, so I can recall it. You document the interviews. Any analysis that comes from that, you also document. Okay, now when I talk about documentation here, I'm talking about system documentation. They're going to hand you policy, procedure, manuals, and the like. Again, you create what I call a source log. And I keep an Excel spreadsheet usually of every document someone hands me, who handed it to me, when I received it, and the identifying information on that document. Why? Because I want to be able to go back and trace my conclusions. I want to be able to say, I was told this in an interview, or I saw this in a document, and here's the revision I was given, and here's who gave it to me. Okay? Same thing with system demonstrations. When you get a system demonstration, take notes. Who's there? Who gave the demonstration? What did you ask? And the like. It's a lot of paperwork. You're going to want to keep it on electric files, but you will develop a better risk assessment. And then we're going to communicate and share risk. We're going to finalize the analysis. We're going to prepare and coordinate a final report. We're going to have a formal kickoff meeting. I did an assessment like this at NASA a couple years ago. We were called in again as a red team. Come in, you have so many hours. Tell me if you can figure out what the big problems are. Then we all sat around a room with the higher management and presented our final report and analysis. And then we're going to maintain it. And unless you're internal to the company, the best you can do is if you're doing this as a consultant, and sometimes consultants, I don't mean you're always coming in from the outside. You might be a consultant within your company. You may not have the ability to control maintaining the risk assessment, but you need to put that in the plan. How often do you want to turn? How do you manage configurations? How to communicate changes? What happens if there's a problem? How do you call that risk assessment up and say, oh my gosh, we need to go back and look at this. We've learned something new, and the like. So here's some tips for you. Manage a risk assessment as a project. You're going to have a schedule, you're going to have a budget, you're going to make assignments, you're going to have a team leader, good project management. And you're going to have periodic reviews to determine if the project's on task. And then, and these are mine in red, keep a centralized source log for all materials examined during the assessment. For each document, interview, artifact, keep dates, who attended, issues, etc. And then document, because you want traceability. This works in one of two ways. And I've had this happen. Someone will call me months later. Can you go back and tell me why you did this or why you suggested this? Yeah, I can, because I have it properly documented. So there's going to be a time gap and you may be doing other stuff. The second of all is immediate traceability. When you present your final report and you make conclusions, someone's going to say, how did you come to that conclusion? You want to be able to reference it. That's the end of this lecture. I hope that was helpful. I'll be back soon.